on May 2nd, 1536. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, walked through the gates of the Tower of London. 3 years earlier, she'd entered that same fortress in triumph, wrapped in gold, headed for a crown. This time, she arrived in chains. And what followed wasn't just an execution. It was 17 days of deliberate psychological torture designed to break her mind long before they took her head. If you think you know how Anne Boleyn died, you don't. Because the darkest part wasn't the blade, it was the waiting. In the spring of 1536 times, the royal court was buzzing with rumors, whispers that the king had turned cold, that someone powerful wanted a queen erased. Behind closed doors, Thomas Cromwell began weaving a trap so precise it would be almost impossible to escape. And the first thread was a terrified musician with no protection at all, Mark Smeaton. A young man in the royal household was seized without warning. He wasn't noble. He had no family name to shield him. And after interrogation that many historians believe involved torture, though official records never say the word, Smeaton confessed to adultery with Queen Anne. That confession detonated like a signal flare on May Day, while tournaments and feasts distracted the court. Sir Henry Norris, one of Henry VIII's closest companions, was arrested. By nightfall, he was on his way to the Tower, protesting his innocence, while the king left the festivities with a face witnesses described as dark with rage. Then the charges arrived, crafted not just to condemn, but to disgust. Anne was accused of adultery with 5 men. One of them was her own brother, George Boleyn. She was also charged with plotting Henry's death, and even with using witchcraft to seduce him into marriage. The language in the indictments was grotesque, on purpose painting a queen not as politically inconvenient, but as a depraved monster. And here's the chilling genius. The accusations were precise, private conversations, glances behind closed doors, secret meetings that supposedly happened when no one could truly verify them. How do you prove you didn't share a forbidden look? How do you fight a rumor that claims to be an eyewitness memory? But the case had cracks, massive ones. Later researchers found that many of the dates and locations listed in the charges were impossible. Anne and the accused men were documented elsewhere, sometimes miles apart. The evidence was fabricated in May 1536, though facts didn't matter. A machine had started turning, powered by Cromwell's planning and Henry's will. On May 2nd, Anne woke up as Queen of England. By midday, royal guards arrived at Greenwich with orders to take her immediately. No ceremony, no formal reading of charges, no time to prepare. She was brought by barge along the Thames, the same route she'd once traveled in celebration for her coronation. This time, there were no cheers. Just the splash of oars and the slow realization that the river was carrying her toward death. When she stepped onto the stones at the tower, her legs buckled. She collapsed. And when she finally stood, she asked for her father. She asked for her sweet brother. No one answered. Anne demanded to know the charges. Again, silence. Terrified. She asked if she would be thrown into a dungeon. The constable of the tower, Sir William Kingston, told her no. She would be housed in the royal apartments, the same room she had occupied before her coronation. That was the point. Luxury as a weapon. Fine rooms, tapestries, windows overlooking Tower Green, while guards watched the door. Every beautiful detail became a reminder of what had been stolen. And Kingston assigned women to attend her, which sounded like respect, until Anne realized the truth. They weren't there to comfort her. They were there to listen, to report, to make sure nothing she said stayed hers. No lawyer, no private counsel, no confrontation with her accusers. Every conversation monitored, every tear observed. Kingston kept notes, mood swings, frantic questions. Brief moments of composure then sent those reports back to Cromwell. This is what torture can look like without ropes or fire: isolation, surveillance, and uncertainty. Anne's imagination filled the gaps. Was an innocent laugh now evidence? Was a casual kindness now seduction without facts? Her mind became its own interrogator. On May 10th, a grand jury declared there was enough evidence to proceed. 2 days later, 4 of the accused men faced trial. The process was swift. Only Smeaton maintained his guilty plea. The others fought desperately. It didn't matter. Guilty. Condemned. Then Anne and George Boleyn faced their own trials. 27 peers judged them, including Anne's uncle, the Duke of Norfolk. Anne defended herself with composure, admitting only harmless acts of patronage. George dismantled the accusations point by point until one final trap was sprung, a note containing a poisonous question implying the king's impotence and questioning Elizabeth's legitimacy. George read it aloud. The moment sealed his fate. The verdicts were unanimous. Guilty. Anne was sentenced to die by burning or beheading, at the king's pleasure. Henry chose beheading, and his court called it mercy. But it wasn't mercy, it was control. Henry ordered a skilled swordsman brought from Calais using a sword instead of the traditional English axe. Cleaner, faster, more elegant, more theatrical. Anne heard about the swordsman and made a grim joke saying she had a little neck. People sometimes mistake that for bravery. But sometimes laughter is what a mind does when it's trying not to break. And then Henry delayed. She was told death was coming, but not when. Days stretched. Each morning, she woke wondering, is this the day? Each night she survived felt less like relief and more like punishment. On May 17th, the men were executed. Her brother died proclaiming his innocence. Anne was not allowed to say goodbye. She just waited alone, surrounded by watchers. Finally, a date, May 18th, 8 in the morning. Anne spent the night in prayer, arranging what little she could control, her final words, her last dignity. Dawn came. 7 o'clock. Then 8. Nothing. The scaffold wasn't ready. She had prepared to die, gathered her courage, made peace, and then she had to do it all again. Kingston apologized as if announcing a delayed dinner. How do you prepare to die twice in one day? That delay, intentional or not, was the final cruelty. It scraped her nerves raw. It stretched the torture to its limit. The next morning, May 19th, something changed. Certainty. No more guessing. Today would be the day. Anne chose what to wear with purpose, a dark gown with crimson beneath martyr's color, then an ermine mantle reserved for royalty. Not vanity. Defiance. She would die as a queen. Not as a broken prisoner. She walked to Tower Green, where a small, carefully selected crowd waited. The French swordsman stood nearby. The sword itself was hidden in straw so she wouldn't have to stare at it. On the scaffold, Anne spoke with careful precision. She would not admit guilt. But she would not openly attack the king either, because her daughter's life depended on what she said next. She prayed for Henry, praising him as a gentle and merciful prince while standing on the platform built to kill her. Some heard irony. Others heard a mother protecting her child. Then she knelt upright, blindfolded, neck exposed. The executioner called out to create a distraction. Anne turned toward the sound. And in that reflex, the strike came clean. One blow. Instant. Silence fell over Tower Green. Cannons fired from the tower, announcing to London the Queen was dead. And then came the final indignity. There was no coffin. Anne's ladies stood stunned. In the end, a guard found an old elm chest, an arrow box from the armory, and Anne Boleyn's body was placed inside. A queen reduced to a piece of military storage. She was carried to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, inside the tower grounds, and buried quickly in an unmarked grave near her brother. No monument, no carved name, as if Henry wanted her erased, not only from life, but from memory itself. But history doesn't stay buried forever. In 1876, during renovations under Queen Victoria, workers lifted the chapel floor. Beneath the stones, they found bones mixed together in shallow graves, hurriedly buried centuries earlier. Among them, investigators identified remains believed to be Anne Boleyn. In 1877, she was reinterred with dignity, placed into a proper casket, her name finally engraved, her resting place marked for visitors to see. 340 years late, but remembered at last, the sword ended Anne's life. But the true weapon was the 17 days before it, the isolation, the surveillance, the unanswered questions, the deliberate uncertainty, the rigged trials. It proved something terrifying. In a court ruled by fear, truth can be manufactured. Law can be weaponized. And no title, not even queen, can protect you once a king decides you must fall. And the shadow didn't end with Anne. Her daughter Elizabeth grew up knowing her mother had been executed on her father's orders. And years later, Elizabeth would be imprisoned in the same tower on questionable charges, forced to stare at the same stone walls, and feel the same cold machinery of power closing in. If you want more stories from history's darkest rooms, where politics becomes punishment and survival depends on silence, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, which Tudor nightmare should we uncover next?